Well, Merry Christmas from Pennsylvania. I just wanted to share a short update, talk to you about some of the developments in the game, and although it may seem like an unusual morning to do that, it's quiet here as we are still waking up, except for my cat apparently. Anyways, so have continued the development of Global Empires, and are now working on a three-person game to see how that balances out, just to give you a perspective of combatants. So this game starts with three players as the British, Germans, and the Americans. And the way this game developed, you can see I'm about a third of the way through it. The objectives were drawn for all three nations. Germany is working to align France, but has been unable to do so. They've aligned the Ottomans. The British have aligned the Japanese, and the Americans have aligned the Russians. So they started the alignment process, and the Russians have aligned the Italians, which effectively just makes them an independent minor. They're still played independently like that. So as the game has gotten started, you can see in my combatants chart over there, we have the Germans are fighting the Russians and the British. The British are fighting the Americans and the Germans. And the Russians are fighting the Germans and the Ottomans. And of course, America is only at war with Britain. So that's kind of how it, oh, actually that should have a German flag on it too. So that's my bad. I'll put that on there in just a second. So that's why this chart is important. Kind of helps you keep things in perspective. And technology is going about a little poorly for the British, but the Americans have upgraded a couple of their factories and are doing exceptionally well. So really the current status of this game is not the reason why I decided to make this video. I just want to talk about some of the development things and some of the challenges. One is the balance. People will ask about why certain powers are favored towards others. For example, if you've seen other videos, the Japanese to the British, or the Italians to the Russians, and the Ottomans to the Germans, and that is a balancing mechanism, as well as the means by which you can align nations, whether it's another major power like the Russians and the French in this case, which are the other two that are not being played by a player. So obviously it's be very contentious, and between three players I'm trying to align those two. And the Americans having the Russians is not necessarily an advantage to them, because they are played separately, and they may not necessarily go to war with some of the same powers, just based on how many enemies they can handle at the same time. For example, with the Americans being at war with Britain, the Russians don't necessarily feel like there's nothing to compel them to also enter into that contest against the British. And for the British, the same. But should they have a need to do so, the Russians may carefully consider that, because they got enough going on all around them. Development-wise, there have just been some things that we've had to shore up. For example, one of the things I ran into yesterday, the Ottomans have been bombing quite a few Russian facilities. You can see my red dice over there marking both that facility in the Crimea and this facility in Greece, naval facilities. So the Ottomans have two bombers, and thanks to the help of the Germans, and they've been carrying that campaign out very successfully. So some may ask, well, why is that? What was the challenge there? As most of you know, inherent air defense in Global 14 is different than inherent air defense in Global 36. Only in the in the dice that you roll for it, 3 or less in Global 36 and 1 in Global 14. So how do we reconcile that in a game that is meant to blend the two rule books and the technologies? Well, on the technology chart is a point in time where air defense units can be developed. In fact, the Americans have developed them. They're the only country that has developed air defense units, specifically of the Global 36 type. So at that point, written into the notes is the fact that your inherent air defense for your facilities moves from a 1 to a 3. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. In fact, after this playing it a couple times, this is the first time it's really come up. But it's important that elements like that are reconciled before the game is released. And so there are other aspects to this game that we continue to catch. Another one that I just cleaned up today, in Global 14, infantry and cavalry and camel units can damage rail lines. But in Global 36, only the Soviets can do that with their scorched earth special ability. So in this game, we're going to continue to allow infantry, cavalry, and camel units to damage rail lines. So in catching those very small items, we're able to make this a much more seamless opportunity for you as a player. So hopefully you're anticipating this game. I will tell you, it has been the most fun I've had with either Global 14, Global 36 in a long time. It continues to be new and different. There are no formulas to this game. You build your alliances. Sometimes that alliance building is going to continue all the way throughout the game. You have an incredible number of objectives that may be played in over 4 million combinations. So that is going to drive activity on parts of the map that you've never seen before. For example, South America is being hotly contested right now between the Americans and the Britons. That is actually what started some of this war. Additionally, you have the Germans, who are being driven by their objectives to take over vast portions of Africa, and they've actually still got a long ways to go. The Italians just got into the game. They just became aligned. The French are not aligned, so they're kind of sitting on the sidelines, kind of watching it go by. The Russians, their objectives may actually still be achieved even while they're losing territory. I won't get into too many of the details, but here's the Japanese, focused on Manchuria, a historical aspect to them. But that may conflict with their partners' desire to see the nationalist Chinese be successful in China in the Chinese Civil War. I think it can still be carried out so that Britain can benefit from the nationalist Chinese objectives as well as the Chinese achievement of their objectives. But in the meantime, the Americans are making huge moves in the Pacific, which has driven a wedge between them and the British, and that's why you see a British fleet on the way. You see the Japanese kind of preparing for that. So what I would tell you is that while Global 14 and Global 36 are exceptional games and very historical, this game is going to drive you to a myriad of alliances, a myriad of objectives, which are going to put you all over the map, possibly in places that you don't see much activity, depending on in Global 14 or Global 36, depending on which game you're talking about. And it is going to drive an infinite number of combinations of activity that you need to be aware of and conduct. Just the unit opportunities. I don't know if you can see this, but the Germans just placed a partisan in Moscow, which is a unit that comes from an expansion. It's been kind of tailored and reduced in simplicity for this game, but it's part of the game. It's part of the opportunity, and it's a way to impact your opponent, utilizing all the resources you have at hand other than just infantry, artillery, and tanks. So, and another aspect of this that's been very fun for me is just the tech combinations that you do see. I don't apologize for the camera move, but if you can look into Russia and see, I've got Global 36 fighters, and I've got Global 14 biplanes. I actually have armored cars, while Germany just produced its first light armor. If you look at my Navy over there, and you can tell the difference between the black and the gray, I've got World War II destroyers matched up with my World War I dreadnoughts. So you talk about just an interesting combination. And just another fun one. There's America with her first light carrier of the game. The first light carrier of this game and the first light carrier of all the nations. And, you know, at the end of World War I, light carriers were being introduced by the British in 1918. So just a fun and interesting blend. Hopefully this game appeals to you and the opportunities, and we'll look forward to getting it out in early 2025. I hope that you and yours are having the best of holidays and a happy new year.